In the quiet, well-manicured suburban haven of Willowcrest, on Sacramento's eastern edge, the spring morning was soft and inviting. Golden light painted neat driveways and tidy hedges, bougainvillea cascaded over walls, and the gentle hum of bees mingled with the faint scent of lavender. Sprinklers ticked in unison, a suburban symphony without a conductor. Kids were at school, dogs barked, and for a moment the world felt perfectly still. Willowcrest prided itself on order. Neighbors offered quick waves but rarely stopped for a chat. Lawns were pristine, trash bins promptly hidden, and anything or anyone disrupting this quiet rhythm was silently deemed not from around here. Marcus Reed, at 28, understood this unspoken code. He'd learned to minimize his presence to be less visible in places like this. His 6-foot frame, sculpted by years of landscaping, moved with an almost apologetic grace, as if trained never to occupy more space than necessary. His deep, sun-kissed brown skin often prompted car doors to lock instinctively. His eyes, dark and steady, held a quiet weariness no one ever inquired about. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, Marcus parked his worn pickup by the curb at the Kessler's house, number 114, and got to work. 3 years he'd held this contract, never missing a day. Yet many older white neighbors still avoided his gaze. Some crossed the street with their dogs. Mr. Holloway from 112 once double-checked if Marcus was lost, even with a rake in his hand. Marcus had learned not to engage, often wearing unplugged earbuds to deflect awkward, thinly veiled suspicions. He simply kept his head down, focused on his tasks, his thoughts his own. That morning, the electric trimmer hummed along the Kessler's hedges, a familiar backdrop to the neighborhood. Across the street, Mrs. Edith Langley, a spry widow in her 70s, meticulously tended her garden, humming softly. Her wide-brimmed hat shaded her face, and a little wooden cart held her tools. Her pale blue house was adorned with cheerful flower baskets and a bloom-where-you're-planted mat. Marcus had never spoken to her, though he'd occasionally caught her quiet, curious glances through her window. To most of Willowcrest he was merely the gardener, the service guy, not Marcus, not Reed. Someone appreciated for tackling weeds but viewed with unease if he lingered too long near front doors. Police cruisers sometimes slowed when he worked alone. No words were exchanged, none were needed. But Marcus wasn't there for their comfort. He was there to work, to earn, to get through another day without incident. His rhythm was ingrained. Hedge, sweep, edge, next yard. Order. Routine. Silence. His shield. Yet this morning felt different, more alert. A breeze tugged at his cap, birds seemed louder. He found himself watching Mrs. Langley longer than usual, noting the gentle tremor in her age-worn hands as she cared for her flowers. Then the quiet shattered. It was a sharp, primal scream, cutting through the trimmer's drone, stopping Marcus cold. A loud clattering followed. He spun around. Mrs. Langley had collapsed, half buried in azalea bushes, her straw hat flung away. Her arms flailed once, then went still. Above her, a dark, shifting cloud of bees buzzed furiously. Marcus dropped the trimmer instantly. It clattered on the driveway as he sprinted across the street, pure instinct overriding all else. No one else moved. Cars drove by. A jogger paused, earbuds still in, watching. But no one ran to help. Only Marcus. As his boots hit the warm concrete of her driveway, a single thought consumed him. Please don't let me be too late. He didn't recall crossing the street. One moment his trimmer fell. The next he was vaulting Mrs. Langley's low flower bed fence, his knees scraping the brick, boots skidding on loose soil. The air now vibrated not just with frantic wings, but with a more raw, dangerous energy. Adrenaline surged, drowning out everything but the pounding in his ears and the high-pitched whine of the bees. Mrs. Langley lay contorted on the lawn, half curled against the bushes as if she'd collapsed mid-movement. Her face was a blotchy red, swelling alarmingly around her neck and mouth. Her straw hat lay upside down nearby, a gardening glove still inside. Her small cart was overturned, tools scattered. But it was the bees that momentarily froze Marcus. Dozens, perhaps more, swarming near her head, crawling over her arms and shirt, a furious, buzzing shroud. Without hesitation he ripped off his flannel work shirt, revealing his sweat-streaked t-shirt underneath, and began swinging it like a lasso, batting the air. He stepped carefully over her, using his own body to shield her face as he swept the shirt with wide, deliberate arcs. Bees stung his arms, his neck, one near his ear, but he didn't flinch. Pain was irrelevant. What mattered was her ragged breath, her chest rising in desperate, shallow jerks, her lips already turning a faint blue. "Ma'am," he called out, his voice low but urgent, unsure if she could hear him. "Hey, it's Marcus. You're going to be okay. Just hold on, all right?" No response, only that terrible wheezing as if her lungs were filling with wet cotton. Marcus glanced at her front door, slightly ajar. She must have just stepped out. No one had followed, no family, no neighbor, no curious bystander rushing to help. The street watched, suspended in judgment, from behind blinds, through kitchen windows, from porches with coffee mugs halfway to lips. One woman across the street even held up a phone, filming. Marcus wasted no more time. He bent low, slipped one arm under her shoulders, the other under her knees, and lifted her carefully but urgently. She was lighter than he expected, frail bones sharp against his forearms. He pushed forward to the shaded entryway, kicking the screen door open with his foot and stepping inside, gently laying her on the cool tile of the front hallway. The air inside was a relief, quiet and still, the bee buzz muffled as the door slammed shut behind him. But the quiet only highlighted how wrong everything was. Mrs. Langley was in anaphylactic shock. He'd seen it once before years ago when a kid at his middle school was stung during gym class. Her throat was closing, her breath shallow and strained, her eyes weakly unfocused. He dropped to his knees beside her, scanning the hall. Keys on a hook, mail on a side table, a framed photo of a man in a navy uniform. Nothing obvious. Then he saw it. On the far wall beyond the entryway, a small wooden box mounted beside the coat rack, a Red Cross sticker on the front. First aid. Marcus scrambled over, yanked it open, and exhaled sharply when he saw it. A slim injector pen nestled among bandages and wipes. "Thank God," he whispered, grabbing the EpiPen and spinning back. He remembered the instructions from years ago. Blue to the sky, orange to the thigh. He pulled off the cap, pressed the tip firmly into the outside of her leg and counted aloud, 1, 3. The click was solid, mechanical. He held it, silently praying it would work, that her throat would open, that she'd breathe. As he withdrew the pen, her body twitched. Her lips parted slightly, then another wheeze, but this one stronger, sharper, a sound clawing back toward life. "Okay, you're doing good," he murmured, brushing a damp strand of hair from her clammy face. The swelling hadn't subsided, but something in her expression changed, an almost imperceptible shift from sheer panic to faint awareness. He pulled his phone from his pocket, fingers slick with sweat, and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? I've got a woman, elderly, multiple bee stings. She's going into anaphylaxis. I gave her an EpiPen, but she still needs help fast. Address. He rattled it off, glancing at the number on the front door. Is she breathing? Barely, but yeah, she's conscious. Swollen, weak pulse. We're dispatching an ambulance now. Stay on the line. He stayed with her on the floor, murmuring calming words he wasn't sure she could hear. His own breathing was ragged now, adrenaline fading fast. He was vaguely aware of the stings on his arms throbbing, but he didn't care. He just needed her to stay awake. She blinked slowly, her lips moving, and he leaned closer, barely catching the whisper. "You saved me." His throat tightened. "No, ma'am. You're the strong one." Through the narrow front window, he saw distant spinning red lights beginning to bloom. Sirens screamed down the quiet street, growing louder with every passing second. Behind them, neighbors stepped outside, phones in hand, expressions a mix of concern and mere curiosity, as if this were another story to consume from the curb. But Marcus wasn't thinking about them. He wasn't thinking about the cell phones, the stairs, or the fact that his skin color often made him a suspect before a witness. He just held Mrs. Langley's hand, firm but careful, and waited for the sounds of boots, voices, stretchers, and noise. Because for now, in this moment, all that mattered was that she was still alive. The wail of sirens shattered the stillness like glass. As they screeched closer, Marcus instinctively stood, backing away a few steps to give the paramedics room. His hands still trembled, coated in sweat and garden dirt. The sting on his neck throbbed, but the pain was distant, background noise. All that existed was the old woman on the tile floor, breathing in shallow gasps, her fingers faintly twitching. When the paramedics burst through the door, they moved with practiced urgency. Two knelt immediately by Mrs. Langley. Another, a stocky white man in a navy blue jacket, turned to Marcus. His eyes flicked to the woman on the floor, then back to Marcus's dark skin, muscular build, dusty jeans and sweat-stained shirt. "You live here?" the man asked sharply. Marcus opened his mouth to answer but hesitated. In a heartbeat he felt the energy shift. Subtle but undeniable. The man's stance stiffened, one hand slowly edging toward his radio. A second responder stepped inside, followed by two uniformed officers. One, taller, mid-40s, face tight with suspicion, let his hand rest on his holstered gun. "I don't," Marcus said calmly, raising both hands slightly, palms out. "I work next door. I saw her collapse in the yard, attack. She has a severe allergy. I found her EpiPen inside and gave her the shot, then I called 911. The officer's eyes narrowed. He looked over Marcus's shoulder at the overturned flower cart outside, then down at Mrs. Langley, now semi-conscious, her throat still swollen, a nasal cannula delivering oxygen. "Step outside for me," the officer said. Not a request. His tone was firm, measured, the kind used when assuming guilt first, asking questions second. Marcus didn't argue. He turned slowly, deliberately, and walked out, hands visible. As he stepped onto the porch, he saw the crowd that had quietly gathered. Neighbors behind hedges, in driveways, on porches, murmuring, watching. A few held phones angled in his direction, the red record light unmistakable. No one spoke up. No one said, "That man just saved her life." No one said anything. He stood on the front lawn, hands still slightly raised, trying not to appear threatening, trying to keep his breathing steady. One officer followed him outside while the others remained inside, their radios crackling. The air was thick now, not with bees but with something colder, more familiar. That same unspoken judgment he'd felt 1,000 times in 1,000 ways. From store clerks following him down aisles to women clutching purses tighter in elevators. A younger cop joined them, looking uncertain, flipping through a small notepad. "Sir, what's your name?" "Marcus Reed." "Spell it." He did. She scribbled it down. "And you say you work next door?" "I've done landscaping here for 3 years. Kessler's Yard. Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays." "Did anyone else see what happened?" Marcus glanced around. People still watched. A few looked away when he met their eyes. Mr. Holloway stood with arms crossed in his driveway, expression unreadable. A woman with curlers in her hair held her phone low at her side but didn't stop recording. No one stepped forward. "I don't know," Marcus finally said. "I didn't see anyone else outside when she collapsed." The paramedics wheeled Mrs. Langley out moments later, secured on a stretcher and 4 in her arm, her face still puffy but no longer blue. As they moved down the walkway, she stirred, her voice raspy, barely audible, but her lips moved with clear intent. One of the EMTs leaned closer. She spoke again, this time louder. "Him. He helped me. That man saved me." The EMT looked over at Marcus. "You Marcus?" He nodded. The man raised an eyebrow and nodded back with a grunt of respect. "Good job, man. You acted fast. You might have saved her life." Marcus managed a faint nod, but before he could respond, the older officer beside him let out a short, curt sigh, then muttered, "Well, that's one version." Marcus turned to him, his jaw tensing. "Excuse me." The officer shrugged, glancing at the gathered neighbors. "Look, not saying you did anything wrong, just, you understand how this looks, right? Woman down, you inside her house, no witnesses backing your story." Marcus stared at him. "So doing the right thing is suspicious now?" The officer didn't answer. At that moment something shifted in Marcus. Not anger, not yet, but the deep, familiar ache of exhaustion. The kind that comes from being questioned every time you show up, every time you try, every time you're not invisible anymore. He let out a long breath and looked up at the sun, still bright, still warm, completely indifferent. One of the paramedics approached. "She's stable for now. You did the right thing." Another voice joined them. An older woman in hospital scrubs, the neighbor from the corner house. She had walked over quietly and now stood between Marcus and the officers. "I saw him run over when she screamed," she said. "Didn't even hesitate. Went straight in. I watched from my kitchen window. Whole thing took maybe 2 minutes." The officer paused. "You're sure?" She looked him straight in the eyes. "Sure as hell. More sure than the people standing around filming and doing nothing." The silence after that was thick and awkward. Marcus let his hands drop to his sides. The officers exchanged a glance, then offered a half-hearted thank you, and began to back off. One tapped something into a tablet, the other walked toward the patrol car without another word. The neighbor in scrubs gave Marcus a small nod before returning to her porch. It wasn't much, but it was something. As the ambulance pulled away, red lights flashing down the sunlit street, Marcus remained where he was, standing among roses, footprints in the lawn, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. The moment passed, the adrenaline faded, and what remained was something heavier than exhaustion. Not regret, not fear, just a familiar weariness. Not because of what had happened, but because of how predictably everything else had followed. He walked back to the Kessler's yard in silence, picked up his drop trimmer and restarted it. The hum of the blades returned, blending back into the suburban white noise. But for Marcus, the morning wasn't quiet anymore. It never would be. The days that followed settled into a rhythm Marcus knew too well. Quiet, unremarkable, deliberately routine. He returned to his schedule as if nothing had happened. Pulling weeds, trimming hedges, blowing leaves into neat piles. On the surface, the street felt the same, but beneath that placid suburban stillness, a tension he couldn't quite name simmered. Not outright hostility, no one had said anything to him directly, but there were pauses where none had been before. Conversations stopped when he passed. Car doors seemed to lock just a second longer. Even joggers seemed to switch sides of the street more often. Still, Marcus didn't change. He woke early, parked in the same spot, went about his work with the same quiet efficiency that had kept him invisible for most of his life. He wasn't angry, not even surprised. He had learned long ago that being right didn't always mean being safe, and being brave didn't always earn trust. But his bee stings were healing and the sun still rose. It wasn't until the following Wednesday, nearly a full week later, that the stillness truly broke. The Kesslers weren't home, giving Marcus the front yard to himself. The late morning sun cast soft shadows on the sidewalk, and a pair of doves cooed from the oak tree. It was peaceful, familiar, until the faint tapping of a cane on concrete drew his attention to the other side of the street. He looked up from the flower bed he was edging and saw her, Mrs. Langley. She moved slowly, her left hand gripping a metal cane, the other loosely holding a paperback book. Her movements were cautious but deliberate. Her wide-brimmed hat was back on, tilted just enough to reveal alert eyes. Her face was still slightly puffy in places, healing, her color not fully returned, but she was walking. Marcus straightened, unsure how to react. He didn't wave, didn't speak. Part of him wondered if she even remembered him clearly, if the trauma had blurred the details or left her uncertain. But she kept walking, straight to the edge of his work zone, stopping just short of the patch of lavender he'd replanted last season. She looked at the flowers, then at him. Her voice was quiet but firm. "You saved my life." Marcus blinked, unsure how to respond. He nodded once. "I did what I could." "No," she said, tapping the cane once against the ground. "You did what no one else did. You ran toward me. Everyone else stood still." Her words settled between them like dust motes dancing in sunlight. There was no audience, no phones, no fanfare, just two people, a garden, and the stark memory of what had happened. "I remember everything," she continued, her gaze unwavering. "I remember your face above mine. I remember the way you spoke. I remember the fear and then the relief." Marcus shifted his weight, hands in his pockets, unaccustomed to gratitude that sounded so genuinely heartfelt. "I wasn't sure you'd even." He trailed off. "I would have died," she finished for him. "If you hadn't known what to do. I wouldn't be standing here." He looked down and used to such direct acknowledgement. She stepped closer, placing the paperback on the top rail of the fence. "I don't know if anyone said it properly yet, so let me." Her voice softened. "Thank you." A breeze stirred between them, rustling the flower beds. The smell of cut grass mingled with the faint perfume of roses. Marcus finally looked her in the eyes. "You're welcome," he said, quiet but certain. From across the street, someone peeked from behind a curtain. Another neighbor on a porch paused mid-sip of coffee. But this time it didn't matter. "Mrs. Langley wasn't finished. I told them at the hospital. Told the EMTs, the nurses, my niece, everyone who came to visit. I said, it wasn't luck, it was Marcus." She smiled, a faint curve of her lips. "They didn't know who that was at first, so I made sure they did." He blinked, not quite ready for the implication. And I told them I want you to keep coming here, she added. Not just to do the yard. I want you to come have tea one day if you feel like it. He let out a soft breath of laughter, surprised by the emotion wrapped in such a simple offer. I'll think about it, he said. She gave a satisfied nod and turned slowly, walking back across the street, her cane tapping softly on the pavement. Marcus watched her until she reached her porch, took one step at a time and disappeared behind her front door. Later that afternoon, after finishing his work, Marcus noticed something odd. A group of teenagers had gathered at the corner, whispering and pointing toward his truck. He walked over cautiously and saw what they were staring at. A video. It was playing on someone's phone, grainy vertical footage, clearly shot from a window across the street. In it, Marcus was seen running toward Mrs. Langley, swatting bees, lifting her, disappearing into the house. A voice in the background whispered, "That's the guy who saved her." He didn't stay to watch the rest, but it was enough to know the story was spreading. Not through official channels, not through dramatic news coverage, just word of mouth, neighbor to neighbor, frame by frame. Quiet truths like seeds planted in silence. By Friday, someone had posted a photo of Marcus on the community bulletin board outside the neighborhood cafe. A candid shot of him pushing a mower, sun behind his shoulders, captioned simply, "Thank you, Marcus." He didn't ask who put it there. He didn't take it down. He just kept showing up. The people who used to look past him now nodded as he passed. Not all of them, not always, but some. And that was enough for now. Because even in a place like Willowcrest, where silence often spoke louder than kindness, something had shifted. Not loud, not sudden, but real. A name carved in honor. It began with a flyer, a simple piece of paper taped to the mailbox at the end of the block. Most people ignored such things, but this one stood out, not for its plain design but for its message. Community thanks and garden dedication. Saturday 4 p.m. All are welcome. No one signed it, but everyone knew. When Marcus pulled up that Saturday, his usual day's rhythm was broken by the sight of folding chairs arranged in a semicircle around a small patch of grass at the end of the cul-de-sac. Someone had trimmed the bushes. Paper lanterns hung from the trees. Tables with lemonade, cookies, and small note cards sat beneath a blue canopy. It was quiet, but people were there, dozens of them. Neighbors who'd never said a word. Teenagers who'd watched him from across the street. Mrs. Langley was there too, seated in the front row, a cane resting across her lap, her chin lifted like a general surveying her troops. Marcus didn't know where to stand at first. He thought about leaving. But then someone waved him forward. A little girl, perhaps 8 or 9, stepped out from behind her father and handed him a folded card. On it was a crayon drawing of a man with brown skin and a green lawnmower, surrounded by bees with big eyes and goofy wings. Above it, in looping, uneven handwriting, "You are my hero." Before he could say anything, Mrs. Langley stood up slowly, the quiet murmurs fading into stillness. She didn't have a microphone, didn't need one. Her voice was steady. "I asked for this gathering," she began. Not because Marcus asked for attention, he didn't. Not because he expected a reward, he wouldn't take one. But because sometimes silence is the cruelest kind of injustice. And gratitude deserves more than a whispered, "Thank you." She turned toward him, her eyes wet but steady. "He saved my life. And I will spend the rest of mine making sure people don't forget it." There was no applause, not at first. Just a long, silent swell of emotion, raw, communal, humbling. Then the clapping began, deeper, slow at first, then rising as more hands joined in. Not performative, not forced, but real. Someone stepped forward and unveiled a small wooden sign at the edge of the garden. Carved into it were 5 simple words: Marcus Garden, in quiet honor. Marcus stood still, unsure what to do with the feeling crawling up his chest. Not embarrassment, not pride exactly, something older than both. Recognition. A name placed not on a screen or whispered behind hands, but carved into wood where it would stay. Later, as the chairs emptied and the sun softened into the gold of late afternoon, Marcus stayed behind to help pack up. Mrs. Langley approached him, her steps slow but sure. "You'll come back next week?" she asked. He smiled. Wouldn't miss it. And when she turned to go, Marcus lingered for a moment, staring at the garden now bearing his name. He didn't need the sign. He didn't need the applause. But something had changed. Not in him but around him. The street saw him now. Not as a shadow. Not as a threat. As a man. as someone who showed up. Someone who ran in when no one else moved. No cape. No speech. Just hands, instinct, and heart. And sometimes that was more than enough. Remember to like and subscribe to share meaningful stories. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.